It's a dark day for the Hampture project. The habitat complex finally sprang a leak. After 10 years of flawless operation, water has gotten inside. Not to worry, there were no casualties. It was really quite a minor leak, as you're going to see. This all happened while I was asleep. The leak progressed through the night. The first warning sign should have been that the humidity inside this module did not decrease. The condensation on the interior wall of the habitat remained very high, whereas it cleared up in this one almost immediately because of the water traps that I keep in line with the air filters. So that meant water was getting in somewhere and replenishing that condensation. But it got much worse than that. You can see a little bit of water in there. A little bit more. A little bit more. More. Notably, it never got into the other module, so the Hampture remained safe and dry throughout all of this, just inconvenienced. It never rose much higher than that. Because it, as I've been telling people about the inherent safety of positive pressure habitats, the water will only rise from the point of entry to the next lowest point where air can force it out, because everything above that stays trapped. And I would have preferred to demonstrate that principle intentionally, but I guess I just should be glad that it worked out as expected when it really mattered the most. The hamster's fine. Probably just irritated and confused. I think I'm more scared than she was. My initial suspicion is nothing to do with the connecting tube. A lot of people suggested that. That's actually the strongest part of the habitat, because every component was designed to be watertight. It was designed to mount to flat surfaces with a watertight seal. It was designed to screw on and be watertight. Everything in here is precision engineered for watertightness. It's got to be something to do with the containers that were not designed to be used this way, although these are waterproof fishing containers. This is a very old habitat. This has been in use for a decade, about. So it's about time I replace this anyway. I'm not going to be trying to fix this, because you know, if something goes wrong and I can't absolutely pinpoint it, I just don't trust it anymore. I'm going to harvest the weights and the gate valve from it, but everything else is going to get tossed, and this thing, of course. Then I'm going to set about ordering the components to build a replacement habitat of this exact type, using the improved construction methodology that I did on this one, which was not so reliant on glue as a sealant, but instead made proper use of rubber gasket washers at every point where a screw penetrates the hull. That was probably also part of it, just the hokey construction of this thing, because when I made this, I was still learning. Lucky for me, the safety properties of ambient pressure habitats prevented a drowning situation. There's not really many conceivable scenarios in which you could have a hamster drown in these things, because it's only going to rise so far. The rest of the air stays trapped, and then the hamster just climbs to safety and waits it out, which is how it would go basically in an underwater colony for humans too. There would be elevated positions you could escape to and wait for rescue. Funny thing is, I've been wanting to do a demonstration of what would happen during the worst case scenario of a leak large enough that water can get into the habitat despite the air pressure. And I thought about drilling a hole in the wall or something and then filming water rising up to the level of the hole. I guess I got my chance. Although the much newer of the two modules, by about 10 years, did not leak or have any problems whatsoever, there has been a catastrophic flooding event, so all components must be re-evaluated. It's sitting there in the aquarium, leaking from the gate valve seal just because it's the weaker of the two, between that and the rubber O-ring on the lid. I learned a lot about how to construct these things since building the older one that leaked. That one was 10 years old. I didn't know rubber-lined washers existed at the time. The newer of the two habitats, which you see on your screen now, was built using everything I learned since that time, and it is by far the better constructed of the two. So I will be replicating that. I will be building a second module as a replacement for the one that leaked, using all of the lessons learned that were applied to this newer module, and that should be as reliable as the one undergoing testing now, although I'm still going to keep it in the water for 72 hours just to be absolutely doubly, triply sure that there aren't any issues, because although this is not NASA, it may as well be given the stakes. I mean, I assume you love your pet, whatever it is, if it's a cat or a dog or whatever, but hamsters are just on their own level of cuteness, so if you can imagine the impact it would have on you if you were responsible for the death of probably the most adorable animal on the planet Earth. Suffice it to say, I've been shaken by this. I'm not letting it completely discourage me. I'm just being very methodical and exhaustive in troubleshooting and designing a solution that will prevent this from happening again. This is also a good opportunity to talk about megahab safety. Megahab, as with all historical human-scale underwater habitats, has been designed with as many of the hole penetrations, like where bolts go through the shell, as possible, as far down on the habitat as possible. The highest hole penetration, if you don't count the dome, which I have total confidence in, is the docking collar. So even if something were to happen, something unfathomable that caused the gate valve to be open while there's no tubing here and water were to enter freely through this opening, it would rise only up to here, up to the level of the opening there, and hamsters would still be able to climb up the tube and seek refuge on the upper floor, which would remain dry because there are no hole penetrations anywhere around here, so air would stay trapped. It would not be able to escape, as was the case for every manned undersea habitat in history, which is why none of them ever had a flooding event that resulted in drowning. In fact, there was only ever one flooding event. That was Sea Lab 1, the very first in the series, and that was not due to a breach. It was due to the cables that were being used to lower the habitat to the seafloor snapping, and the whole habitat sagged at a 45-degree angle while the bottom hatch was open, so seawater was able to partly flood the inside. But even then, no drowning would have occurred if there were a human inside, because there was still a giant pocket of trapped air. That's the inherent safety of positive pressure designs. So long as there's not a differential in pressure, the air pocket can't shrink down to almost nothing as it would in a submarine that keeps the interior at sea level air pressure. Because the pressure of the air inside is equal to the water outside, the water can't further compress it. So the water only gets up to the height of the breach, which is where the compressed air, which is still coming down through the tube in that scenario, pushes the excess out and prevents the water level from rising any further. And that also means there's still life support in that situation. So the hamsters will not asphyxiate, just as they will not drown. And they won't electrocute either, because all of the electronics in Megahab are being designed so they're up on the ceiling. Not coincidentally, so they're also up out of range of the hamster's jaws, so that no chewing of the cords can occur. Leak sensors will be included in every habitat from now on. That's why I've bought 3 of these. They're cheap individually, it adds up, but I feel it's going to be worth it. Check this out. Ham bunker is completely finished. I just need to seal it up with some silicone grease around the lid and bury it. Having a little bit of trouble with the hole that I'm digging. More on that in a bit. The Twitch channel is also up and fully operational, with all 3 webcams in the sub-level 1 and sub-level 2 of the bunker operational, as well as the surface level camera, because a bunch of you said that was a must. That's not a want, that's a need to see them when they're above ground as well. So you've got all 3 now. They're all hooked up and working and broadcasting. Not that there's anything to see. And just to show it literally is completely done. It just needs to be buried. Digging holes turns out to be more strenuous and take longer than I expected. I have to dig around the clutter, as the under porch area is mostly used for storage. And I don't think I'm going to be able to get the bunker in the ground this episode. I think it's going to take a little while longer. Some things I didn't show in this video include a new UPS, which is going to be used as a separate battery backup system for the other pump, so that both pumps will have their own individual battery backups, just for an extra layer of redundancy. I'm going to be adding the moisture alarms into the existing habitat and the replacement habitat, which should be ready sometime next month. Big respect to people who dig for a living, because even after getting that hole down about 4 inches into the earth, I smell like a zoo from all the sweat, and my arms and my back hurt. I'm sure it must be worse for people who do that day in and day out. I'm going to make slow but steady progress at it, and before long, because everything else is squared away, everything else is built and hooked up and working, Ham Bunker should be in the ground and broadcasting subterranean hamster knots. So stay tuned for that.